Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd Podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. So it's 2024, and let's talk about something really, really important. If you're ever injured, check out Morgan & Morgan. It's America's largest injury law firm, and they are there for you. Over 100 offices nationwide. Think about that. More than 1,000 lawyers with over $20 billion, that's a B, $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients. Things happen in life unexpectedly. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is really, really easy. Like winning in the NFL is hard. We know that quarterbacking in the NFL is hard. Submitting a claim is easy. You're ever injured? Check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound law from your cell phone. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting for you to get a full and fair compensation if there's an unexpected accident in your life. And I've had a few.
Well, we have another NBA season in the books as the Boston Celtics are hoisting the Larry O.B. We got Colin Cowherd here to break it all down. We will also react to the finals MVP news when the report comes down. Obviously, we're waiting on that still. But Colin, I want to kick it to you like this. Every NBA champion has this like indelible mark on the history of the NBA. How will you remember the 2024 Boston Celtics?
I think the deepest team easily, the most equipped with shooters, passers, ball handlers. You've got 6 players, Horford, Porzingis, Derek White, Brown, Tatum, Holiday, all really high-end NBA players that would be either a 1 or a 2 on a lot of different teams in this league. Dallas is like the LeBron James Cleveland team that got to the finals against the Spurs. I don't really think they're close. LeBron eventually left that team. They're just ill-equipped. Listen, they got a break, is that Minnesota knocked out Denver, perfectly built to beat Denver. Denver led by 20 in the fourth, 20 points in that game and lost. Denver matches up with Boston. Maybe doesn't beat them, but matches up well. Minnesota doesn't necessarily match up. Dallas absolutely doesn't match up. They just don't have the wherewithal. They don't have enough players. Boston's doing this 5-out, spread the floor. There's nothing they can do. They can beat Mavericks off the dribble, set up easy jumpers. It wasn't, just throw out game 4. Okay, so a team comes out, Boston comes out flat. All these games, I felt like I was watching a championship team and a team that could have lost in the second round of the Western playoffs. I think. And it's not a shot at Dallas, but they didn't look close. This was not, there was no drama tonight. 8 minutes into the game, it's over. Everybody for the Celtics, they were playing like it was, it had sort of a regular season feel. Everybody was loose. Everybody was confident. It's not a knock. It's just this game did not feel like a finals game. It felt like a first round game. Celtics were a heavy favorite, took an early lead. It didn't feel like a finals game. So I thought, Tatum's in these kind of moments, he's such a beautiful player. He's playing with confidence, like he's playing the Orlando Magic on a Friday night. He was playing at a different level.
Yeah, I think the Celtics team is the rightful champion this year. I think they have a great claim to be remembered as the best team. Like, we can talk about Denver, and do I think Denver would have matched up better with Boston? Of course. But the reality is I don't think any team had a clear-cut case like, oh, if Boston faced these guys, they were going to lose. Even with Denver, they won in the 2 regular season matchups, but one of the specific things that this Boston team does extremely well is spread you out and attack your weak points. And Denver did have some slow-footed guys, guys like Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, and Michael Porter Jr. Boston did not shoot well in either regular season game against the Nuggets. And so I even think that series was a lot more up in the air than people realized.
And those were pressure-packed games. There was a lot of talk. This was a finals preview, and Boston didn't shoot particularly well. So that's a classic. That's the kind of game that we have criticized Tatum for. A big game. Everybody knows it going in. and Boston doesn't shoot particularly well. So it's this series, I felt by the second quarter of game 2, I'm like, oh, this is a problem. This isn't a good matchup. This series is over. Didn't you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I thought that Dallas was really in some deep shit and on both ends of the floor, in the sense that like they could not contain the basketball. They were in rotation constantly. And on the other end of the floor, they could not get Boston in rotation. There was nothing they could do that made Boston overreact to anything that they were doing. And again, like that's kind of like when I look back at this Boston team, I think, you and I came into this season viewing it kind of like a 3-team top tier. It was basically Denver, Boston, Milwaukee. And then we found out pretty quickly off the top, like actually Milwaukee's not very good for all the reasons we've discussed. And it kind of felt like a 2-team race for most of the season, and Boston survived. Denver didn't. I thought like, one of the things I want to give Boston credit for, because talent does not always win in the NBA. It does a lot of the time, but it does not always win in the NBA. It's about the team that can play the best basketball on both ends of the floor. And so one of the things I want to give this Boston team credit for is, even though they had an overwhelming talent advantage in every matchup, it felt like they played to their capability a lot in this playoff run. That was what was infuriating about them at times in the regular season. All the criticism of Mazzulla ball, it wasn't like, it was the way the Celtics were playing it. They were taking a lot of bad shots. They weren't being deliberate about their spacing and driving and kicking for great looks. They were playing some sloppy basketball from time to time, and they dropped some games they shouldn't have won or shouldn't have lost. I think they were, I want to say they were like 2-4 against the top 4 seeds in the Western Conference. It was it was pretty bad. They were pretty bad against the good teams at the top of the West during the regular season. And a big part of that was they were just kind of playing beneath their potential. To their credit, in this postseason run, I thought they achieved a level of defensive intensity I did not see from them in the last 2 seasons. I thought that they guarded Dallas extremely well. I know that you've got a stat you're going to tell us about Dallas's scoring later, but like I thought they defended extremely well. And on the other end of the floor, Tatum and Brown embraced their roles as drive and kick guys to get the defense in rotation. They played a great team brand of basketball. It was fun to watch. I'll tell you this, Colin, there were times during the regular season where I hated watching Boston because they would just dribble up the floor and shoot a 3 without even getting a paint touch. And they played a fun brand of basketball in this finals. I enjoyed watching them.
So let's just attack the Jayson Tatum thing. So, the Boston fans have amnesia. So Tatum's probably going to win. I think Jaylen Brown was the more consistent player in the series. Tatum had 16 points in game 1, couldn't shoot, 18 points in game 2, played well in game 3, but Jaylen Brown in game 3 had 30 points, more rebounds and more assists than Tatum, and was just 3 games through this series, Brown was the alpha. That's not disputable. Game 4, Celtics blown out. Tatum plays better tonight. But tonight was no pressure. Like, the game was over early second quarter, the series is over. I've never questioned Tatum in games like tonight. I've never questioned Tatum's talent. But in the first 3 games of this series, especially the first 2, when you're establishing the series, Jaylen Brown was clearly the best player Boston had. That is indisputable. Those are pressure games. Tonight's a rout. Tonight's one of those games we all played in high school. Maybe you didn't, where you're like, at halftime, you're like, I don't really need to play. We're down by 28. I don't really need to play. Like, it was a blowout. I mean, I'm looking at my notes here. First quarter, Mavs implode late in the quarter, down 10. Second quarter, this isn't close. Celtics throwing bodies at Luka. 5 guys on the floor, all can shoot. 60-42, Duncan, Derek White 3, ugly, Pritchard 3. Like, this thing was over midway through the second quarter. And Rory McIlroy missed a putt on Sunday at the U.S. Open late. He didn't miss putts on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday early. Even in the U.S. Open, putts late are not putts early. Tonight's game is a pressureless game once you're up by 20. I mean, the game's over at halftime, and Tatum played very loose. He's a beautiful player. If he wins MVP, I'm totally happy for Jayson Tatum. But let's be honest. In the first 2 games, first 3, the tone setters, Jaylen Brown was the guy for the Celtics. And he also won Eastern Conference MVP. He was the better player in that series. It's not a knock on Tatum, but he is a player that in really tone-setting games, he leaves you wanting a little bit. Tonight was loosey-goosey, rolling downhill. That's all I'm saying. It's not a knock. If he wins it, I had the Celtics at 6. I've said it. He's somewhere between the 5th and 8th best player. I'm good with. I'm not a hater, but it's amnesia to say, oh, MVP of the series. Like, let's go back to the first 3 games. It wasn't close. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I'll actually take it to put it a little bit more aggressively. Like, there wasn't a single moment in this entire playoff run where Boston was under any sort of pressure at all whatsoever. They played 3 bad teams in the Eastern Conference, and then they played probably the best matchup for them out of the West. And so that specifically just avoids any of like the real drama that you think of when you think about historical finals MVPs. You think of drama, you think of pivotal games, Jason, you think of that.
When we have questions about Tatum, it's never talent. It's moments. It's intensity. It's the Kobe MJ shit's tied 86 all. So this series just didn't have any of that stuff.
No, I agree. And like, as far as the finals MVP thing goes, like I think I personally would be okay with either of them getting it. And the case for Tatum is like, I like it when the history books tell the story of that team. And to me, even though Jaylen Brown played better than Jayson Tatum over the course of this playoff run, I thought Tatum was the best player on the team for the entirety of the season. Like, I thought Tatum was and so if I look back at the Wikipedia page and it says 2024 NBA champion, the Boston Celtics, Jayson Tatum finals MVP, I'm cool with that. But he was the best player in the series 1 game out of 5.
That's right.
In addition to that, I thought Jaylen Brown had the biggest pivotal shots of the series. In that late game run from Dallas in game 2, he had the driving left-handed layup over Maxi Kleber. In game 3, when it was in crunch time there late, he hit those 2 massive fadeaway mid-range jump shots that kind of iced the game. I thought he had the most iconic plays of the series. I thought those 2 dunks, those 2 driving one-handed monster slams he had were like the iconic dunks of the series. And so for me, like, I'm cool with Jayson Tatum winning the award, but I believe Jaylen Brown deserves it. And I just got the text message from our guy Josh. Jaylen Brown has won Finals MVP. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think he was the better player consistently. I think your point's the best one. All the big shots, and I do think the first 2 games of the series, those are tone setters. If Dallas wins one of those games, you lose home court advantage. And both of us said coming into the series, the pressure was all on Boston. So winning those first 2 games at home was not just, hey, we protected home. It kind of made a statement. And in both games, if not for a brief Dallas run, they had a really good fourth quarter, if I recall, in game 2. Boston was clearly the better team. So that the tone-setting games here were games 1 and 2. And Jaylen Brown was clearly the best player. And so I think they got it right. It's nothing, I can love a player but not love a series. I mean, remember when the Meta hit the game winner in game 7 for the Lakers over the Celtics? Kobe was awful in game 7. He was just couldn't hit anything. Kobe's so remarkable. He just had a horrible night. We got to be honest about that stuff. And so I credit the people who voted on this because I thought Jaylen Brown, Eastern Conference Finals and Finals, was the better player. Tatum, to your point, on a macro level, was the best Celtic all year. I think that's absolutely true. And 2 things can be simultaneously true.
Yeah, exactly. And like, as far as the Jaylen Brown piece goes, I really only have a problem with the non-superstar finals MVP when we get into box score watching and we start giving it to like a role player. Like, that was the travesty of the 2015 Warriors. Like, Steph Curry's getting blitzed all game and Andre Iguodala's getting wide open dunks and corner threes because Steph's getting blitzed and a Cavs team with 1 star, Andre Iguodala, held LeBron to a poor shooting percentage, and then the voters end up suddenly giving the award to Andre Iguodala, and I'm like, what are we doing here? But this is not what happened here. Like, we've discussed multiple times throughout the series, Jaylen Brown is playing at a level that is similar to Jayson Tatum's. Like, he is ascending. And, one of the things that I think is fascinating about that is you and I talked in after the Eastern Conference Finals last year, we talked about should they look into trading Jaylen Brown. And one of the things I said, if you remember, was I said they have a better chance of Jaylen Brown improving into what they need than they do to try to flip a player of his caliber into a better player, which was obviously a long shot or a risky shot. And so to Boston's credit, they just kind of like let these guys play through their lumps. And here comes Jaylen Brown going from flat out embarrassing against Miami last year. Like he was bad against Miami last year to being the Eastern Conference Finals MVP and the NBA Finals MVP. And one other thing I wanted to say before I kick it back to you, this is what scares me about the Tatum piece moving forward. He's not as bad offensively as he showed in this playoff run. There's this thing that can happen in basketball. I don't have an explanation for it. This is all part of that whole basketball is more art than science thing. But Tatum's been in one hell of a shooting slump in this postseason. He's been getting like 0.8 of a point per jump shot when he's typically a solid 20% better than that. And one of the things to keep in mind there is like Boston's going to be back next year, and Tatum's probably not going to shoot this poorly. And so like even though Tatum's Jaylen Brown's a deserving MVP, like Tatum's not going anywhere, and he's going to be here leading this charge next year. And like one of the nice things too is his demeanor is the kind of guy that doesn't take this sort of thing personally. And so I'm kind of happy for them both in that regard.
I want to pivot a little bit though to Kyrie Irving. And I thought about this. So, again, basketball is the artist sport. It's international soccer. It does matter how you play, not just that you score. And Messi's, Pele, just they're artists, and that there's absolute value in that. And the same in basketball. Dr. J, stylistically, Magic was cooler than Bird. Michael Jordan was great looking, well dressed, super fun. Everything about MJ just felt big. Duncan was boring. And there's a reason, history has been kind of cruel to Tim Duncan, who's better than anybody wants to acknowledge, and nobody except people in San Antonio will acknowledge how dominating he was. He didn't have a lot of style. But Kyrie Irving played 8 games at Duke, no impact. Was kind of a bust pre-LeBron in Cleveland. Like couldn't stay healthy, nobody liked him. Goes to Boston, doesn't work. Brooklyn, First, early in Dallas, you kind of weren't sure. And then he has this playoff run, and we're all like, this is great. So take out a couple of years with LeBron in his prime. LeBron made everybody look great. Everybody. And Kyrie bailed on that. In this great run, a no-show in the finals, and all over the map offensively. He had bad shooting nights. And I'm not giving you much in rebounding, assists, and defense. Like he needs to shoot well. He's not Jaylen Brown, where you could tell me he's 4 for 14 and he'd have 8 rebounds, 7 assists, and play the hell out of the defensive end. That's not what Kyrie is. You need him to shoot. So, I look at Kyrie and I understand the finishing package. It's artistry. It's beautiful. No dispute. But even this playoff run, like, Anthony Davis gets criticized sometimes for being inconsistent. Not defensively. I get a star. And offensively, 3 out of 4 nights, I know what I get. Like, I know LeBron loves Kyrie. AD's a more consistent star player. Jaylen Brown's a better basketball player. I thought Kyrie in these playoffs, his highs are so high, Jason, you can't take your eyes off it. It's a fireworks show. It's awe-inspiring. It's the singer hitting the highest note. But man, he throws out some stinkers. He was invisible for portions of this game. He didn't score in the first quarter. Like the most important quarter of the season for the Mavs, he didn't do anything. There's my Kyrie take that his aesthetic beauty overshadows a lot of nights where he gives you, if he's not shooting well, he doesn't give you anything else at all.
Yeah, pretty consistently in my player rankings, I've had him right around that 20 spot when I'm ranking players. I'm generally higher on Kyrie than some people. There's a pretty substantial anti-Kyrie coalition out there for obvious reasons because of his off-court stuff. And like one of the things with this particular team that I look at is like I remember going into the series, there were people saying like, "Oh, what if Luka and Kyrie are the two best players in the series?" And I'm like, whoa, hold on, like let's chill out. Like I like Kyrie. He's got this incredible upside,
Yes.
which is what you're referring to, which is the fireworks show. But what he is a average to slightly above average kind of guard defender when he's playing hard, but he had a pretty bad defensive series. He is a guy that is a pull-up jump shooter. And so
Yeah.
guess what happens with pull-up jump shooters? Sometimes they go in, sometimes they don't. And that to me is like there's like one pull-up jump shooter in NBA history who's just been like reliably great in the postseason. That's Steph Curry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All the other guys, they're the freaky athletes that can get to the
Right.
rim consistently and dominate the game physically in some way, shape, or form, right? And so honestly, like, because this is one of my big takeaways from Dallas, and like I've been kind of feeling this way since the beginning of the series, but I don't think this Dallas Mavericks team is close. You
Either.
kind of mentioned this in your
I don't
opening
either.
piece.
I don't
Like,
either.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think they're close. I think that they caught some really favorable matchups out in the Western Conference. I think they're good. I think there was a tier of teams beneath Denver where all the West was, and they managed to kind of weave their way through that with some favorable matchups, right? But like I think Denver would have beaten them pretty soundly in the
They
Western
don't match
Conference
up
Finals.
with
I think they would
Denver.
have
Yeah,
gotten them.
and the other thing we have to admit, Jason, is because of Luka's ball usage, I felt like he wasn't healthy for the last two series. He looked
Mhm.
fatigued. He looked beat up. So again, when Kyrie's not delivering, it becomes very Luka dominant. I thought he looked. I thought you were getting about 80% of Luka in this finals, and some of that's just when you're the guy and it's little Jalen Brunson. It's like Jalen's great, but there are limitations to when Jalen went on that 40-point run, you're like, this isn't going to end well. Like he's just you can't be that dominant. You have to be able to and that's why the Celtics work is that Tatum wasn't good in the first two games. He and Brown were both good in game three. Tonight, Tatum was superior. I mean, there were nights that Derek White, I mean, Pritchard before the half, like it's symphonic watching Boston. They're just handing the baton off. Man, Luka, he had that baton out multiple times and nobody grabbed it. And I thought he looked, and I agree with you. OKC's only getting better. Denver's already favored. Boston's not getting significantly worse. Sixers have,
Memphis will be back.
and by the way, keep your eye on what Houston's doing. They had a stretch this year. You're like,
Mhm.
uh-oh, they're probably a veteran away. So I listen, we've seen this before. It's like in the NFL, the loser of the Super Bowl, like most of the time, doesn't fare well. Like this felt like a magical moment in time for Dallas, but there's some real flaws here. We would both acknowledge that. It is too Luka dependent. That's what it feels. It does feel like that Cavs team that was really very LeBron dependent, played with great energy, if you remember. Zilgauskas, I mean, they played with tremendous energy. LeBron was captivating. They had streaky shooters on the wing, but then you watch them against San Antonio and you're like, all right, five of the best six players are all Spurs. And that's how I felt in this series.
Mhm.
We're this close to crowning an NBA champion. I like the Celtics, by the way, in six. Jaylen Brown's going to be my MVP, and I love the Celtics in game one. But sign up 90 seconds. Put in the code Colin, COLIN. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you're a new customer, bet $5. That's it. Just bet $5, and you'll get $150 instantly in bonus bets. The code Colin, COLIN, shows them that you're a new customer to get $150 in bonus bets only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I'm leaning Celtics in six, baby.
Yeah, I one of the things that I find fascinating, and I'm actually curious to get your take on this. Like, one of the things that is hard to do in a situation like this after you have a successful postseason run is to be realistic about how far you are away. And so, for instance, Lakers fans last year, it's like, we made the Western Conference Finals. And I'm like, okay, well, like Golden State has always struggled against big athletic
Yeah.
teams. That was a pretty favorable matchup for you. And then also that Memphis team, young Ja Morant driving into Anthony Davis all series was obviously not going to work. So it's like you caught a couple of favorable matchups. Then you ran into a real championship level team in Denver and you got your ass kicked.
Right.
So you're not close,
Right.
right? And so when I look at the Dallas piece, this is what I think about. Like when the circumstances are favorable, meaning like when Luka has obvious mismatches he can pick at the entire series, and then on the other end of the floor, when they can really load up the strong side and keep their rim protectors at the rim and hide Luka on the opposite end of the floor, they can get stops. But where I get concerned is how many times in NBA history have we seen a team led by two stars that are both at least combining for two bad defensive players that go win the title? It's exceedingly rare. And so one of the things that I wonder, I shouldn't say exceedingly rare. I can't.
It's never happened. Ever.
Like I would say, I would even say like the case would be, oh, what about Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, which I understand. But the flip side there is like even the two of them were not this type of like Jokic was a dominant defensive rebounder who could actually do some stuff in pick and roll coverages defensively, and Jamal Murray did his job, and he's bigger. But Jamal Murray's bigger.
They also had
Kyrie,
an elite
bigger,
defender
stronger.
right off that in Gordon, so they had. Yeah, I mean they accentuated, like, you know, it's like the Mavericks or like the Warriors. They hid Steph, Iguodala, Clay. So you can get away with your star not being an elite defender, but you have to have elements. You have to have size, Jokic, athleticism, Gordon. Like that. That's not what this Dallas team is. It's their two stars are. Luka is disengaged a lot defensively.
Yeah, he was terrible in 4 of the 5 games of the series defensively. I thought he was bad again tonight. They were just bringing him up into the ball screen. He would just kind of stand around in no man's land. Jrue Holiday would slip out of it. He'd get a layup. They'd get him on there at the end of the first half, just like game 2. They just attacked him in switches time and time and time again and scored every single time. Like, it's a real issue. And so let me just pitch it back to you like this. Is the version of a Luka Doncic-led team that wins a title one day, is that version of that team constructed around Luka and then a secondary star that is an elite athlete that can impact the game more with his physical tools rather than with his skill? Because I wonder if this Dallas team is always going to be the kind of team that can beat certain matchups, but will always struggle against teams that can spread them out, just simply because that's just way too weak points in their defense. Do you think that that's what the direction they're going to have to go
I think
eventually?
literally a perfect player for Luka is Paul George. Probably privately doesn't want the final shot. Luka does. Excellent defender, long, willing, can give you 30 in non-pressure situations, could really have nights where Luka can almost take a back seat. But in the big moments, you know, Paul sometimes takes weird shots or bad shots. Luka doesn't. Like, this is one of these things, it's a better story than a team. Kyrie's not the fit. A poor defensive player who's hot and cold and needs the ball. That's not the fit. The fit is a long wing defender who can score 30, but like a Pippen, has no problem letting the man shoot. Paul's always been Paul can hit the big shot, but it's like, he can also back away from it. He's not a selfish player. So it's Paul George is one of those guys. He kind of works with everybody. I think, Paul's gotten a bad rap. I mean, he kind of fits everywhere. You go back to those Miami Heat series, Paul was working with Roy Hibbert, a non-scorer, George Hill, Frank Vogel, who loved bigs, not, got guards. They give Miami Wade and Bosh and Battier and LeBron. They gave him troubles. Those were really good series. So I just think it's one of those, Kyrie, Luka, the movie poster is better than the movie. I think they need a different star. And this is something I was told years ago by a GM, like 20 years ago. He said, it's not about the star, having a star in the league. There's a lot of them. It's the right star. And then once you get that star, the Warriors were brilliant. Here's Steph's deficiencies. Let's just layer it and protect him. It's like hockey. Our great scorer is a finesse player. Let's protect him. You have to protect. You don't have to protect Tatum. You have to augment some offensive, production. Porzingis, more scores. You don't have to protect Tatum. You have to protect Luka defensively. Like, I've said this. He's a much better Carmelo Anthony. He's much better, but disengaged defensively. Not sure he's in great shape. It's kind of, he's the sun. Everything revolves around it, sort of. So I'm not anti-Luka, but I don't see him being part of a dynasty. I just think he's a He's a meteor. You just don't see stuff like this in the history of basketball. But all stars are not equal. Like Duncan is exactly what you want your star to be, kind of boring, does everything well, doesn't have to take the final shot. In the end, sacrifice salary. Like Duncan's never gotten the respect. Like he literally did everything well except handle the ball. And what did they put around him? Parker, Manu, ball handlers. So I just think Luka's spectacular, but you have to protect him more than anybody wants to acknowledge. I guess that's my take.
Again, it's about acknowledging that you're not close. And so I think there's a bunch of different things that they have to address. The first piece is Luka specifically, and we talked about this a lot after game 3, has to get in better shape, has to make a commitment to the defensive end. Like I want to see Luka come in next year and look different physically, because this is year after year that this has been an issue and that he's not made any sort of attempt to address. So that's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is we've seen this consistently with Dallas. They've kept trying to build the same team around him, because we saw this with Brunson and Dorian Finney-Smith and that team that went to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. Like they've built a team around 2-shot creators and then play finishers. And just like what happened against the Warriors in 2022, eventually they're like, actually, we're just kind of fine with Luka taking these tough contested 2-point jump shots. His step back 3 just isn't reliable enough. Once again, this entire postseason run, he just couldn't knock it down at a high enough rate. Like there's a lot of games where he has 30 points on 27 shots, and you're like, this isn't actually something that's causing problems for the opposing team. And so I look at it too, one of the things I like about doing something like going after a Paul George or more of a skilled, a multi-talented forward, is it makes for less redundancy.
Right.
It makes it so that you can it makes you a different type of team to deal with on a possession by possession basis. Because what happens is when you lean on the Kyrie thing, it's like Kyrie has a rough series. Suddenly he doesn't bring anything else to the table, and now you look severely limited. And so I think in general, they've just got to have kind of this self-awareness to acknowledge that they're not close and to make these structural changes. But one of the problems, Colin, is I don't think they're going to. And I think they're going to run it right back and be like, oh, Derek Lively's going to lead us to the promised land next year. He's going to get way better. And you know what? I think they're going to lose in the first or second round next year in a jam-packed Western Conference when they catch an unfortunate
Let's
matchup.
go back to the Celtics. Very deserving. Don't forget, they had a dominant record. They lost to Denver, but they had a dominant record against the West, even more dominant against the East, flushed through the Eastern Conference playoffs and the finals. So, there are these teams too that, we're so used to dynasties in the NBA. I was talking to Chris Broussard today. We were talking about teams that won a championship that weren't a dynasty, but they were great teams. And one of the first ones was the Jerry West, Gail Goodrich, Wilt Chamberlain. Remember that 33-game winning streak Laker team that I think beat the Knicks and won a championship. Now, they didn't reel off a lot of them, but in a singular season, that was an older Wilt. That's one of the greatest teams of all time. There was a 76ers team that had Moses Malone joined Julius Erving, and they were kind of missing a dominating interior scoring presence. And for a year or two, Jesus, I remember those Sixers well. Malone it's just hard to Moses Malone, if you ever saw him play, nobody discusses him. He was as dominating a rebounder as I've ever seen in the history of basketball with Dr. J and good guard play. And I think Boston falls into that group. So right now, we thought Denver was going to run off 2 or 3. Boston in a single season, like that West Goodrich Wilt team or the Moses Malone Dr. J team, for a season, lightning in a bottle, health, spectacular, just flush through the playoffs. The question will become, they will play with a champion swagger next year. They probably won't be as relentless in the regular season. This is, kind of predictable. They'll be, they'll have their little swoons and won't be, but I do think there's a chance it's a back-to-back championship, because cross your fingers on Porzingis' health. They're bringing the guys back. You'll play with more confidence. Tatum comes into a season like, okay, I got it. I got my money. I got my title. I think it does take pressure. I think it was building. You and I said this. Celtics had to win this. After that Warriors final where they came home and kind of laid an egg emotionally, they had to play well in this series. I thought by Second quarter, game two, it was like, this is a mismatch. But I think next year you'll see this goes down to me as a in moment in time, a great team in a great moment. Um, Too good not to win a championship, but at times too weird to be a dynasty. I mean, Jaylen Brown wins the MVP and he averaged 20 a game. He didn't average 30. He didn't average 28. He averaged 20, 21 a game and was the MVP for the second straight series. So historically, can we acknowledge they're a little bit of an odd, great team? Like, yeah.
No, they're absolutely weird. I mean, like when we think about when we list the all-time great teams in NBA history, we think like 2017 Warriors, 2013 Heat, teams like the 2001 Lakers, the 1996 Bulls, right? The 1986 Celtics, like the 1987 Lakers. We think of these teams, and every single one of them is led by one of the five best players in NBA history. In my opinion, Steph Curry is the fifth best perimeter player that's played since 1980. Like, I think he's right up there with Bird and Magic in that tier. So like it's just funky to see a team that is as dominant as the Celtics have been. But I think one of the things too is this kind of stuff bears out in time. Like, you know what, Celtics fans, they're going to want a certain amount of like credit for being dominant. And like, here's the thing, like you beat the Cavs, the Heat without Jimmy Butler, the Pacers, and the Mavs. So like I'm not trying to but one of the things with NBA history, because like people said this about the Nuggets last year. Now I thought the Nuggets run was a little underrated because they went through LeBron and AD, and they went through KD and Devin Booker, and they went through Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. Like I actually thought that Nuggets team played some tough opponents, but like everyone was like, oh, Denver had an easier path. Well, guess what happened this year? They had to play a really tough team in the second round. They lost. So like NBA history has a chance, has a kind of like a habit of working these sorts of things out. Like next year, they're probably going to have to play a Milwaukee in a playoff series, or a healthy Knicks team, or a team like Denver out of the Western Conference, or maybe what if Oklahoma City makes some big trade this summer and they end up going to the finals, and it ends up being like NBA history has a kind of a habit of working these things out. Everything about how this team is remembered is going to be about the big picture. So for instance, if they lose next year, you're going to zoom out on a 3-year window here, and you're going to be like, embarrassing loss against the Heat in the conference finals, beat 4 mediocre teams, then lost the following year. People will write the story of that Celtics team as an underachieving, overly talented team. But if they go out next year and they beat better teams on their way to the Larry O'Brien, people will zoom out and be like, this is an all-time great team. So like, that's the thing. Like you're going to get another crack at the table next year. It's like Jason Tatum said, got to do it again next year. Go ahead, do it, and it'll shut everybody up. Like these things get worked out with wins.
I think a team to keep your eye on is the Knicks. I think one of the great things, if you're a Knicks fan, because they don't match up from an offensive perspective. They just don't have that many guys who can catch it and shoot it and ball handle and pass. One of the things that's great about the Celtics winning, if you're a Knicks fan, it does force you some urgency. Like, guys, we can't make a tweak. We're not a tweak away from beating Boston. Like, we got to go out and get guys like Mikal Bridges and another score. Boston really puts pressure on Eastern teams. It's one thing if you're a Western team and you lose to Boston in the finals. You got to the finals, but you're not getting past Boston in New York with a tweak. You're just not. Even Miami, Bam and Butler. Butler will probably be banged up by the time, if he's in Miami Heat. They need another, not Tyler Hero. They need another player. So this is the good thing. If you're a Miami fan or a Knicks fan or a Sixers fan, this is like, guys, this wasn't competitive. Like this, how many blowouts? They had like 13 blowout wins. It's like tweaking is not beating. Nobody in the East has Jokic. Okay. You don't have Jokic. So tweaking's not going to do it. And I think that's sort of the advantages. I say this in sports all the time. The great thing about Harbaugh at Michigan for a Buckeye fan, it puts pressure on going and getting Chip Kelly as an offensive coordinator. It's like they're pushing us around 3 years in a row. You want your rival to be viable because it puts pressure on your owner and your front office. And so I'm watching this game tonight, and I'm thinking, if I'm a Knicks fan, you may hate Boston, but your front office, these are smart people now in New York running that franchise. You got to bring a Mikal Bridges on and another guy that can drop 20. DiVincenzo's become a great catch and shoot guy. Brunson's going to give you 28. Mikal Bridges could give you 24. And I've got to get somebody better than Mitchell Robinson in the post that can give me offense. So that's the upside for the Eastern Conference teams is I think Daryl Morey, the Knicks, Indiana, if they can get somebody, the pressure's on. You got to add multiple pieces over the next couple of years to beat these guys.
And aggression is going to be the key because, again, like, how did Boston do this? They did this by trading for Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. Like, Brad Stevens just hit 2 massive home run. I went back and looked at that trade and saw that they ended up like netting 2 first-round picks in the Porzingis trade, and I'm like, oh man, like anybody could have had him. And then Boston went and got him. And then like even looking at Denver, it's like they went and got KCP, they went and got Aaron Gordon. Like those are 2 like slam dunk moves to surround Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr., and Nikola Jokic. That aggression is the big piece there. Even going back to 2021, they won after they traded for Jrue Holiday. The Bucks did. They traded for Jrue Holiday. They went and they won the title. And so, like, keep an eye on those aggressive teams this summer, the teams that add talent. There are a lot of young teams in the NBA right now that are like this close to becoming great. That Thunder team, that Orlando Magic team is probably like 2 years away, but they're going to be really, really good. You mentioned the Pacers. If they make maybe one more addition this offseason, they could be in the mix. The Knicks are obviously going to be aggressive. I mentioned Memphis earlier. Like Memphis, this kid Gigi Jackson that they have on the wing is awesome that they discovered this year. He like slots perfectly between John Morant, Desmond Bane. They're going to have Jaren Jackson coming back. They're going to have a big look. They're going to go get a center, and they're going to have a massive front line that could contend with Denver as long as John Morant can like stay healthy and available for his team. I think they could be really good. Like the league is just like this Celtics team is kind of settling right in this nice little opening here where all the older teams are kind of falling apart and all the younger teams are not quite there yet, and they're having a lot of success as a result.
Jason Timpf, Hoops Tonight, been a blast. NBA Finals, it's in the books. The Celtics, too good, as we said, to not win a Finals. It was this year. Really, it's got a LeBron, Cavs, Duncan, Spurs feel to it where you kind of knew early on, 4 or 5 of the top 6 players felt like they were all in Boston. They also, I wrote this down in my notes. When Boston in the third quarter, when they're playing collaborative basketball, it's beautiful. They are, it is like it's almost like they're playing, and when they're playing comfortably, and in this series they were, it's loose. I mean, they are really like those Warrior teams, even with KD and Clay and Steph, guys that shoot a lot. They were pretty. That was really beautiful basketball. The Celtics had moments tonight, and in this series, you're like, that's how to play basketball. That's just drive, pitch, high IQ, everybody fits, no animosity. All starts with Tatum, who's sort of, he's the ultimate team guy. But Boston, a confident Boston looks like a champion. And they were never put in a position to question themselves in this series or in the playoffs. A confident Celtic team like tonight, this series, that looks like what an NBA champion does.
Yeah, they played a fun brand of basketball. I enjoyed watching them. Colin, this has been another fun postseason in the books. I'm sure we'll touch base at some point during free agency, but I always enjoy talking basketball with you during the finals. We're going to call it a night, guys. This NBA Finals Game 5 instant reaction was brought to you by Chase Freedom Unlimited. Unlimited 1.5% cash back is just the beginning. Cash back 3% on dining, including takeout, 3% at drugstores, 5% at Chase Travel, and 1.5% on everything else. How do you cash back? All right, everybody. We will be back tomorrow to get a little bit deeper into some of the NBA Finals storylines, and then we're turning our attention to the draft and free agency because the NBA calendar never ends. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and Colin and the volume as well as our channels that we've been trying to grow. We appreciate you guys.